35 plus years ago, Russia and China were on the brink of falling apart. For the Russians, they had warehouses full of RM-7 rockets designed for taking up cargo up into space. Yet at the same time, they had bread lines where they couldn't provide enough food for their people. Um, the military, the navy, they had nuclear submarines parked up, rusting away, very, very dangerous. And at the same time, their land military, the 40,000 plus tanks that was all along the eastern border, were less about invading Europe and were turning more towards suppressing the people in Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania, those places like that. Um, I visited Budapest in Hungary a few years back, and on one side of the Danube, on one side of the River Danube, you have the town of Pest, which holds the Houses of Parliament, and the other side of the Danube, you have Budapest. Bud had a massive fortress on a hill, and the Soviets had taken over that fortress. And the Hungarian people, as I understand it from the guide, were frightened because the Soviets, the Russian soldiers, had their guns pointed across the Danube, across their city. Furthermore, in Budapest, there's the House of Horrors, where the Stasi, or secret police, were stoking up paranoia and confusion amongst the citizens of Eastern Europe states, and neighbours were encouraged to tell on their neighbours, and that was the way of control. And they had managed to do that for 10 years plus, and it all came to a head. The USSR fell apart. Consequently, um, the West could have just turned their backs on the USSR. They could have turned their backs on China. But instead, over 30 years, they invested trillions of dollars into the Russian economy, into the Chinese economy. And both those economies grew and grew and grew. And it came to a point there that instead of Putin looking after his own people, looking after the entire Russian Federation and bringing in democratic institutions into his country. Likewise with the Chinese, instead of doing that, they resorted to cronyism, nepotism, corruption. And as a result of that, today we see Putin pushing hundreds of thousands, if not million plus, of his soldiers into the Ukraine in the form of meat wave attacks. Likewise, in China, they are being belligerent, pushing borders with India, all along the Asian Sea. They're pissing off the Philippines. They're pushing at the Vietnam. They've the eight mark line across there, and they're threatening everybody in their region. And likewise, we also see in Israel, they seem to be acting with impunity on the people of Palestine. And over the last 30 years, we called it the peace dividend. The idea of investing trillions, if not tens of trillions of dollars into Asia and into Russia and into those places was to raise, it was called globalization. It was all about raising people's income levels so that they could get a taste of what freedom really is. Ideologically, economically, politically, it was all about progress and development. However, over the years, it looks like it's been stymied. We see dictatorships, we see things going on in the background, the likes of the Uyghur minorities in China, what's happened in Nepal, what's happened in Hong Kong. It seems, and the Russians as well, in Georgia and in the Ukraine and in Chechnya. And we see it today as well in northern Syria and the Houthi rebels as well. There's still an awful lot of um, violence and an awful lot of chaos in those regions. So over the 30 years or so, um, the West has been very patient, and in Trump's words, we've been very kind. Well, the US has been very kind. They have indeed. Um, the only thing that could slow these belligerent countries down was the threat of sanctions and the use of sanctions. And we see there when Russia was sanctioned for oil and gas for their invasion of the Ukraine, what that did was countries were able to investigate what Russian transactions were going through their countries. And through it, we discover that there was a lot of drug money going around, gangland money going around, money laundering, oligarchs, money going to places where it shouldn't have been going. And furthermore, we also discovered that there's a ghost fleet of oil tankers out there keeping the Russian economy going. So just there last week, just there in the last couple of days, Trump has announced his tariffs. And in a way, sanctions were bad, but tariffs are even worse. Tariffs, what I get from that is it's highlighted the inequalities of trade between the United States and all the countries that it's invested in over the last 30 years. What I get from this is, it's quite a shock to the world economy. It's really, but when we stand back a bit, we start to realize. Firstly, I never realized that nearly 40%, we were putting 40% tariffs on top of our exports to America. I never realized that. So for a lot of citizens out there, we're probably just realizing that it doesn't sound fair that we were charging 40% and the Americans were charging us zero. So from the European, I hope to see, I'm fairly confident that Europe will look at the whole tariffs that are being applied on the US trade, and they will hammer out a deal that is fair and equitable, and a very adult and very logical kind of conclusion will be made of it, and it would only strengthen the bonds between Europe and America. For the Israelis, though, they've been hit with tariffs as well. But for them, they're going to have to prove to America that they are ideologically in line with the US and their principles and values. They have to prove that, it's worth it investing in Israel. So it'll be a hard sell for the Israelis to do that to America. And it's time. It's good that they can actually look at what's going on over there. Likewise, with the Chinese, I'm fairly confident that they will be rational and they will hammer out a more equitable deal between the US and China. And as for the Russians, it's a very clear message to the Russians, really, because this is Trump, this is the President of the United States of America putting it out to the rest of the world and saying, look we've invested in ye for the last 30 years. Now show to us, prove to us that you have actually learned something and that you're willing to find a better way and progress, and we'll discover a new and better future for all of us. It's a big ask, it's a big challenge, and it's probably going to be painful for the next few months. But I'm confident that we will come out of this a lot better and a lot healthier. What more can I say to you? Greenland. Yeah, Greenland. Why is Trump all about Greenland? Well, when I think about it, Greenland is approximately roughly the same size as Siberia. Greenland has pretty much the same mineral resources and other resources as the resources that are in Siberia. Now, there's a platform in Siberia. It's called the Sakhalin 2 platform, and its estimated worth is something like $1.2 trillion. And the West, the European companies, American companies, South Korean companies have been investing in the Sakhalin 2 platform and project about bringing oil and gas out of the Arctic. And they've been doing that for the last 10, 15 years. And then recently, on account of the Ukraine war, Putin has seized that asset. Now, I'm just thinking to myself that had Europe, had the West invested in that kind of project in Greenland, where it's nice and safe, tucked nice and safely between the US and Europe, for the amount of money that the West would have put into it, we would have got so much more had we done that 30 years ago. And if going forward, after the tariffs issue has been brought to a head, and Europe and America decide, yeah, it's time to start investing in Greenland, Greenland will supply us with all the rare earth minerals and whatever resources fairly and logically, and in a much better way than what was done in the Siberian Arctic. And again, it's a clear message that if Russia is not willing to follow um, logical, human, Western values, values such as equality and honor and things like that, it only stands to reason that if Russia does not comply with that, then then it's going to be a strange relationship going forward. And furthermore, from a military side of things, I've been talking about technology in warfare the last few podcasts, and it looks to me that if Europe or America gets involved with the Ukraine conflict, it's going to be drone warfare, and I don't think there'll be as many casualties on the European and American side as there would be on the Russian side. Technology has moved, like we have, or the Ukrainians have done an incredible feat with their drone warfare. I can only imagine what the United States and the European armies have up their sleeve. I wouldn't like to be on that battlefield. That's all I have to say. Take care.